My wife left me because I spent too much time helping old people. Not because I cheated. Not because I drank. Because I showed up for strangers who had no one else. And the worst part? She didn't just walk out on me, she walked out on our kids too. Said she didn't want to be part of other people's tragedies. I thought my life had fallen apart, but it turns out, that's when it finally started to make sense. 12 years. That's how long Carol and I were married. We lived in a quiet, upper-middle-class neighborhood just outside Seattle. One of those places where the lawns are manicured to HOA standards and everyone pretends they're one remodel away from a feature in Architectural Digest. We had 2 kids, Jake and Masha, and what looked like a picture-perfect life from the outside. I work in IT infrastructure. Project management for a private aerospace firm. It's not flashy, but it pays really well. And the reason we have the house, the 2 cars, the ski trips every winter. Carol, meanwhile, is a real estate agent. She's had good years and bad years, but she's always been more focused on image than income. To her, success was measured in likes, curated brunches, and wine tastings with developers she called friends, but secretly hated. For a while, we were in sync, at least I thought so. I didn't mind that she was always dressed up, always networking, always talking about building our brand. I figured, let her chase the dream. I had mine, a stable home, good kids, and time to enjoy life. But at some point, that wasn't enough for her. The signs were subtle at first. She started calling my job safe, instead of successful. She joked that I should switch to consulting and get serious about money. Never mind that I already made more than her 2 best-selling years combined. She didn't respect what I did because it didn't look impressive. No flash, no drama, no audience. Then came the moment that really stuck with me. We were sitting at the dinner table with the kids, Jake talking about building a Lego city, Masha asking if she could learn guitar. I was soaking in the chaos like it was my reward for the day. And Carol just scrolled through her phone. Barely reacted. When I asked what was wrong, she looked up and said, "Do you ever wonder if we're just coasting?" That word hit me like a slap. Coasting. I wanted to say, "Is peace not enough for you?" But I didn't. I just nodded and changed the subject. I didn't know it then, but that moment was the beginning of the end. Because soon after that, I found something that gave me more meaning than any paycheck ever could, and she absolutely hated it. The first time I met Mr. Dalton, he was standing at the edge of his driveway, poking at a pile of wet leaves with a metal rake that looked older than me. He wore one of those military-issue field jackets, and had a cane hanging off one arm. I slowed down as I drove past, rolled my window down. "You all right, sir?" he grunted. "Leaf blowers are for cowards." I liked him immediately. I parked the car, grabbed my gloves from the trunk, and spent the next hour helping him clear out his gutters. He didn't say much at first, just grumbled about city regulations and the neighborhood kids. Texting instead of talking. But before I left, he said, "You got time tomorrow? That damned attic light won't stay on." That was how it started. Mr. Dalton was in his late 80s, a Vietnam vet, lived alone in the same 2-story house he'd bought in 1974. No kids, no grandkids, no nieces or nephews that he kept in touch with. Just a pension, a perfectly mowed lawn, and a dogged collection of war memoirs. I later learned his wife had passed away over 2 decades ago, and he never remarried. The neighbors waved at him, but no one ever stopped. Except me. Carol noticed pretty quickly. At first, it was passive-aggressive jokes. "What's your new boyfriend need today? More light bulbs." Then it turned to annoyance. "You've got a wife and 2 kids, Tom. You're not some charity case." I tried to explain. "He's alone, Carol. He's got no one. I just stopped by, make sure he's okay, help with stuff that'd be dangerous for someone his age." "And what about your family?" she snapped. "You think Masha and Jake don't notice their dad disappearing every Saturday?" I wasn't disappearing. I was trying to show them something. That helping others didn't have to be scheduled. That doing good wasn't about selfies or donations, It was about presence. About showing up. But Carol didn't see it that way. She saw Mr. Dalton as a threat. Not romantically, obviously. But a threat to her version of success. He didn't fit into the sleek, curated lifestyle she was trying to build. Helping him didn't make us richer. It didn't improve her brand. And worse, I didn't care. What she didn't know was that Mr. Dalton wasn't just another neighbor. He was reminding me of something I'd forgotten. I grew up with no parents, bounced around the system. I know what loneliness looks like. I know the ache of being forgotten. So when I saw it in his eyes, that quiet expectation that no one would knock, no one would call, I couldn't ignore it. Helping Mr. Dalton wasn't just a kind gesture. It was personal. It all came to a head over a bowl of cold soup. It was a Tuesday night. I'd gotten home a little later than usual. Mr. Dalton's heating had gone out. Turns out his pilot light had failed, and with the temperature dropping fast, I didn't feel right leaving him to figure it out alone. I stayed until it was fixed. Didn't even check the time. When I walked in, the house was quiet except for the sound of Carol's slamming cabinets. The kids were already in bed. The soup she'd made was sitting at my spot on the table, congealed and untouched. "You said you'd be home by 6," she said, not even looking at me. "I know. Dalton's heat went out." "Of course it did," she cut in, spinning to face me. "Of course something went wrong for your new project. You're like a rescue dog looking for fires." I blinked. "I'm just helping someone, Carol." "No, you're avoiding us," she said. "Let's call it what it is." That one landed hard. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized this wasn't just about tonight. This was about every time I chose to be somewhere she didn't control. Every time I prioritized something that didn't come with accolades or financial return. "It's one guy," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "An old man with nobody. I stopped by, I fixed things, I talked to him. That's it." She folded her arms. "No, Tom. It's never just one guy. It's Dalton. It's that blind woman 3 streets over. It's the guy with the broken hip. It's all your little charity errands that keep you out of this house." I wanted to say, "And what keeps you in it? Your laptop? Your client dinners? Your Instagram reels about kitchen backsplashes?" But I didn't. I just sat down, took a bite of that cold soup, and listened to the silence swell between us. Then she said it, the sentence that made everything real. "If this is the life you want, Tom, then maybe you don't need a wife. Because I'm not going to build a future with someone who'd rather play handyman for the dying than show up for his own family." I looked at her, stunned. "You're serious?" "I've already called my sister," she said. "If this doesn't change, I'm moving in with her for a while. I need space." She walked out of the room like she just announced we were out of milk. No drama. Just finality. I sat there in the dim kitchen, soup still untouched in my mouth, and realized she didn't just resent what I was doing. She resented who I was becoming. After Carol's ultimatum, I took a hard look at my schedule. I didn't want to lose my marriage, not like this, not over something that was supposed to be good. So I adjusted. I scaled back the volunteer hours. I made sure I was home by 6 sharp, even if it meant telling Mr. Dalton I couldn't stay for tea. I even started blocking off Carol time on my phone calendar. Every Thursday, I took her out to dinner, no distractions. Friday nights I cooked. Sundays I helped Jake with his model rocket projects and tried not to think about all the people who'd texted asking for help that I hadn't responded to. It wasn't easy, but I did it. And you know what? It didn't matter. Carol's attitude didn't change. If anything, it got colder. She'd scroll through Zillow listings while I served her favorite wine. She'd sigh when I asked how her day went. She started using the word charity like it had a bad taste. "Must be nice, your little charity work." As if it was a phase I needed to grow out of. But I'll never forget the night the mask really slipped. We were at a dinner party hosted by one of Carol's colleagues, A guy named Derek who flipped luxury homes and wore $300 shoes like they were flip-flops. Everyone there was dressed like they were trying to be seen, not comfortable. I felt out of place, but I smiled and made small talk. Carol was radiant, floating between conversations like a seasoned politician. At one point, someone asked what I did. I said I worked in IT infrastructure. Polite nods. Then someone else chimed in. And I hear you do a lot of volunteer work too? I smiled. Yeah, I help some older folks in our neighborhood, driving, fixing things, that sort of stuff. A couple of people made surprised but respectful comments. That's really kind of you. Or, not many people take time for that anymore. And then I heard Carol's laugh, sharp and too loud. Oh, he's obsessed with it, she said, waving her glass. Seriously, sometimes I feel like I'm married to a hospice nurse. Everyone chuckled awkwardly. I didn't. Later that night, when we got home, I finally said something. What was that about? Why did you say that? She didn't even pretend to be sorry. Because I'm tired of defending you, she snapped. Do you know how exhausting it is to have to explain to people why my husband spends all his free time with dying people? You don't think it's weird that you'd rather hang out with someone's grandfather than, I don't know, me? I stood there speechless. Not because I didn't have words, but because she finally said what she'd been holding back for months. She was ashamed of me. Not because I cheated. Not because I was lazy or cruel. But because I helped people who couldn't offer anything in return. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't about time or neglect. It was about values. Mine and hers. And we were no longer on the same planet. It happened on a Wednesday morning. The house was quiet. The kids had already left for school, and I was getting ready to log into a project kickoff meeting. I came into the kitchen and saw them, her house keys, sitting neatly next to the coffee machine, on top of a folded note. I need space. I'm staying with Nora for now. Please don't make this harder than it already is. That was it. No signature. No heart. Just her clean, detached handwriting on one of our fridge notepads. I didn't chase after her. Maybe that was my mistake. But honestly, I was too numb to move. I stared at the note for 10 minutes before I even picked it up. She'd really done it. Later that day, Masha asked where Mommy was. I told her the truth, or the gentlest version of it. She's staying with Aunt Nora for a while. Grown-ups sometimes need to figure things out too. Jake, being older, didn't say anything. Just nodded once and went back to his cereal. But I saw the flicker in his eyes, the one that said this isn't temporary, is it? And I didn't know what to tell him. The next few weeks were a blur of split schedules and strained texts. Carol came by once a week to check on the kids, but always made sure I wasn't home. The kids noticed. Masha cried one night and asked if Mommy didn't want to see Daddy anymore. Jake stopped asking questions altogether. Then, 3 weeks later, a manila envelope arrived in the mailbox. No warning, no conversation. Just the silent declaration that she wasn't coming back. Inside were the divorce papers. And on the line where it asked for the reason, she checked. Irreconcilable differences. I stared at that box for a long time, trying to make it mean something. But really, I knew what it meant. It meant she couldn't reconcile who I was with who she wanted me to be. And she had no intention of meeting me halfway. That night, I sat with the kids on the couch and told them, as gently as I could, that things were going to change, but we'd still be a family. Jake asked, "Are we still going to help Mr. Dalton?" That hit me harder than anything else that week. Because even with everything breaking around us, that's what he wanted to hold on to. And that's when I knew I wasn't just going to keep doing this. I was going to make it our thing. You know what surprised me most? Carol didn't even ask for custody. Not joint. Not weekends. Not even a holiday schedule. Her lawyer had included some boilerplate visitation language in the divorce papers, but when it came to actually discussing the kids, Jake and Masha, her own children, she just said, "They're better off with you. You have the time." That was it. like we were talking about transferring gym memberships. I signed the papers, stunned. Not because I wanted a custody battle, God no. I was relieved, honestly. But I kept waiting for her to call. To say she changed her mind. That she missed them. She didn't. So that house, which once felt like a stage we both performed on, became something else entirely. It was messy. There were Legos on the stairs and cereal bowls in the living room. But it was real. Ours. I sat the kids down a few days after the papers were finalized. Listen, I said. Things are going to be different now. Just us. But that doesn't mean things have to be sad. In fact, I was thinking. I trailed off and looked at them both. Masha's eyes lit up instantly. She was always the more curious of the two. Jake just raised an eyebrow like, okay, what now, Dad? I was thinking we could start helping Mr. Dalton together. And maybe a few others in the neighborhood. What do you think? Jake looked hesitant. Like every weekend? Not every weekend, I said. But sometimes. You can say no anytime. I just thought, maybe you'd like to be part of it. They have great stories. And they love having visitors. Masha didn't even hesitate. Can I bring my drawing pad? Absolutely. The next Saturday, we brought groceries to Mr. Dalton. He was surprised to see the kids but delighted. Masha sketched him as he told stories about working on helicopters in Vietnam. Jake helped me adjust his shower handrail. On the way home, Jake actually said, "That guy's kinda badass." We started a rhythm after that. Once a week, sometimes twice, we'd visit someone. Check in. Help where we could. I let the kids decide who we visited. They started keeping a list. Mr. Gillespie needs light bulbs, Miss Henry's cat medication, Dalton wants help picking a new radio. Our world got smaller, slower, and infinitely deeper. I noticed something else too. The kids smiled more. Masha stopped asking when Mom would call. Jake started talking at dinner again. I think they saw what I was trying to teach, not just through words, but through action. That connection, real connection, is worth more than whatever image Carol was chasing. And in that old neighborhood full of aging porches and forgotten faces, we started to build something beautiful. Together. The last time we saw Mr. Dalton, he insisted on making tea himself. I offered like I always did, but he waved me off with that raspy bark of a voice. "You're not gonna turn me into a house pet, Tom." So we sat at his cluttered kitchen table, sipping weak chamomile, while Masha showed him her new sketchbook. Jake had brought him a radio catalog from the hardware store. Mr. Dalton circled half a dozen models with shaking hands. "That one's got knobs," he said. "Not those damn digital things. Can't trust a radio without knobs." We laughed. He was slower that day, but still sharp, still stubborn. He asked Jake if he'd learned to drive yet. Jake said, "I'm 12. Mr. Dalton just smirked and said, "12's not too early if you've got guts." We stayed for an hour. Maybe 2. When we left, he stood on the porch, leaning against the railing. I remember thinking he looked smaller. Like the coat was wearing him instead of the other way around. 3 days later, I got the call. He passed away in his sleep, they said. A neighbor had noticed the papers hadn't been picked up and called the police. The officers found him in his bed, arms crossed like he was just napping. No next of kin. No emergency contact. Just my number on a fridge magnet by the door. I didn't cry right away. That came later. First, there were logistics. I went to the hospital. Signed forms. Collected his things. They handed me a small box, his watch, wallet, and a ring with a U.S. Army emblem. It barely filled half the cardboard. The funeral was quiet. I brought Jake and Masha. The 3 of us were the only people there besides a funeral director and a silent young veteran who I guess had been assigned to cover services like this. Jake helped carry the small urn. Masha placed a single drawing inside the velvet box. It was of him, smiling crookedly on his porch. Back at home, I sat alone in the garage that night and finally let the grief in. Not because he was family. but because he'd become something like it. He was the first adult I could remember, aside from teachers or caseworkers, who looked me in the eye and spoke to me like I mattered. Like I didn't have to prove my worth. His house sat dark at the end of the street. Every time I passed it, it felt like a light had gone out in our neighborhood. The silence from Carol became permanent. After the divorce papers were signed, she didn't just step back, she vanished. No calls. No texts. No birthday cards. No "How are you?" messages. Not even through Nora, her sister. Masha would still check her phone sometimes, but she stopped asking. Jake didn't speak about his mom at all anymore. She'd cut the cord and walked away from her own kids without even looking back. I don't know if it was guilt or pride or just cold detachment. But I stopped waiting for her to come around. I had 2 kids who needed me to be present, and an empty chair at Mr. Dalton's kitchen table that weighed more on my heart than I expected. I missed him. I really did. It was strange. He wasn't a relative. He wasn't someone I'd known my whole life. But after he died, I found myself glancing at my phone like I might have missed a text from him. I'd drive past his house and instinctively slow down, looking for the porch light. It had been a month since he passed when the letter arrived. Thick envelope. No return address. Just my name, handwritten neatly across the front. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Mr. Thomas Adler. You are formally requested to attend a reading of the last will and testament of Mr. Raymond J. Dalton, to be held on Thursday, 10 a.m., at the office of Wellington and Price, 19th floor, downtown Seattle. Attendance is required for disclosure. Identification will be requested. Executor's office. I read it 3 times. I didn't understand. Ray had no family. No friends that I knew of. I assumed when people like him passed, their estates were handled by the city or social services, maybe sold off to cover taxes. I never even considered the idea of a will, like he'd sat down and written out who got his books, or his scratched-up recliner. I didn't know what I was walking into. I figured maybe he left me a watch or a picture. Something sentimental. Something simple. But deep down, something gnawed at me. Ray always had layers. And I had a feeling this was just the beginning. Downtown Seattle always felt like a different planet. Glass towers, valet parking, coffee shops that served drinks with names longer than my old grocery list. I hadn't been down there in years. But that morning, I put on my best shirt, combed my hair twice, and rode the elevator to the 19th floor of a building that probably charged more for rent than I made in a month. Mr. Adler? A woman at the front desk asked, glancing up from her screen. I nodded. Right this way. Mr. Wellington will see you now. The office was minimalist and intimidating, clean lines, gray leather chairs, and a wall of books that looked untouched. Behind a large walnut desk sat a man in his 60s with a navy suit and a voice like cold water. Have a seat, he said. Thank you for coming. I sat, unsure of where to look or what to say. Raymond Dalton named you as the sole person to be present for the execution of his will. I blinked. Wait, just me? The lawyer nodded. He had no surviving relatives. No listed heirs, outside of a few minor donations he instructed us to make to certain military charities. But the bulk of his estate was left to you. I didn't understand. I was just his neighbor. I helped him out, drove him to a few appointments, fixed his porch light. That's all. Mr. Wellington gave a small, practiced smile. Mr. Dalton seems to have seen things differently. He pulled out a thick folder and slid it toward me. I didn't open it right away. My hands were sweating. There's a letter inside. We'll review the legal assets in a moment. But he insisted you read the letter first. He was very specific about that. I opened the folder slowly. On top was a handwritten envelope, old and yellowing, sealed with wax like something out of a movie. I cracked it open and began to read. And with every word, my stomach dropped further into my shoes. Ray hadn't just left me something. He'd left me everything. and I had no idea what I was supposed to do with it. I sat there, stiff in a chair, holding a piece of paper that shook in my hands more than I wanted to admit. It was his handwriting. I recognized it from the labels on his kitchen spice jars and the old birthday card he gave Masha, blocky, slanted letters in black ink. Tom, if you're reading this, it means I finally lost the argument with my ticker. Damn thing kept going longer than the rest of me. I won't make this sentimental. You don't like that kind of thing. But you showed up. You kept showing up. When most people walked past an old man like he was just part of the scenery, you knocked. You fixed things. You sat and listened. And you brought your kids with you. I watched you more than you realized. You reminded me of the kind of man I wanted to be, back when I still thought I'd have a family. You gave me that, at the end you gave me family. So I'm giving you what I have. My house. My savings. And the other stuff you'll find listed below. I don't want you to sell it all and run off. I want you to use it. Not only for yourself. Use it for people like me. People who don't get visitors. People who think they've been forgotten. Build something. Make it last. Don't screw it up. Ray. I stared at those last 4 words for a long time. Don't screw it up. That was the most Ray thing he could have written. No mush, no tear-jerking quotes, just a simple command from one stubborn old man to a tired volunteer who never expected anything. When I looked up, Mr. Wellington was already preparing another folder. Raymond Dalton left you his home, fully paid off, and a modest sum in liquid assets, savings, a military pension account, some antiques. But the most significant portion. He opened the next folder, and I saw company names. Stocks. Numbers that didn't make sense. Is the portfolio? Ray had been one of the earliest private investors in a company that started in the 80s and skyrocketed in the early 2000s. Everyone thought he lived modestly because he had no money. But he'd had millions tied up in shares he never sold. Never touched. Just sat on. Until now. I couldn't speak. Not really. I think I said something like, "This is insane." And Mr. Wellington gave me a small nod, like he'd seen this before. I went home that day feeling like the ground had shifted under my feet. Because it wasn't just money. It was a mission. And I had no clue where to begin. I didn't tell the kids right away. I came home from the lawyer's office, set my coat down, and just stood in the kitchen. For a while. Watching the slow drip of the faucet and trying to figure out how to explain that the man they used to bring soup to on Sundays had just left us a fortune. I didn't want them to think this was about money. It wasn't. Not really. It was about legacy. About what Ray saw in us, and what he trusted us to do with what he left behind. That night, over spaghetti and garlic bread, I finally told them. There's something important I need to talk to you both about. Jake looked up from his plate. Masha stopped twirling noodles and leaned in, chin resting on her hands. You remember Mr. Dalton's house? They both nodded. Well, he left it to us. In his will. Jake's eyes widened. Like we own it? Yeah. It's ours now. What about his stuff? Masha asked. We'll go through it together. But there's more. I paused, heart racing. He also left behind a lot of money. Investments. Savings. He didn't talk about it much, but he was very smart with his money. And he didn't have any family, so he gave it to us. Jake sat back slowly. Why us? I swallowed. Because we showed up. Because we made him feel like he mattered. That's what he wrote. He said we were his family, whether we realized it or not. The room got quiet. Masha was the first to speak. So, what do we do now? And that's when it clicked. I pushed my plate aside and pulled out Ray's letter, placing it on the table between us. He didn't want us to just take the money and spend it. He wanted us to do something with it. Something that helps people like him, people who feel forgotten. I looked them both in the eye. I don't want to buy a bigger house. I don't want new cars or vacations. I want to use this gift the way Ray asked us to. I want us to fix up his house and turn it into a place where people can come when they're lonely. Where they can talk, have tea, get help. We'll make it a home for the whole neighborhood, not just ours. Masha whispered. Like a place for old people? Exactly. Not a retirement home. Not a clinic. A home. A place with warmth and stories and food and conversation. And we'll run it together. If you want. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Can we still live there too? Yeah, I said. That's the idea. Masha smiled. Can we paint the walls yellow? I laughed. Sure, kid. We can paint them whatever color you want. That was the moment it stopped being about what we lost, and became about what we were about to build. We moved into Mr. Dalton's house on the first Sunday of spring. There was still a chill in the air, but the sun had started peeking out more often, and Masha insisted we open every window as soon as we got there. It needs to breathe again, she said, running through the rooms like she'd lived there her whole life. Jake took a more measured approach. He found the attic first, then the basement, then the garage, where he spent hours inventorying Dalton's old tools, labeling them like sacred artifacts. The house smelled like dust and history at first. But by the end of the week, it smelled like garlic bread and fresh paint. We painted the walls yellow, just like Masha wanted. Bright, ridiculous yellow that made the hallways feel like they were smiling. We kept most of Dalton's furniture, repaired it, polished it. We left his armchair in the front room, just as it was. We didn't call it his chair, but we all knew. Neighbors started stopping by. Some just out of curiosity. Others dropped off casseroles or boxes of odds and ends. In case you're setting up something nice in there. Word got around quicker than I expected. One afternoon, Mrs. Connolly, a widow from 2 streets over, showed up with 2 jars of jam and a teary smile. Ray used to bring me the crossword section when my hands got too shaky to hold the paper, she said. He was rough around the edges, but he had a good heart. You're doing right by him. That night, we sat on the floor with dinner on paper plates and no curtains on the windows, and for the first time in years, I felt something deep in my chest settle. Not pride. Not relief. Belonging. We weren't just moving into a house. We were stepping into a purpose. The plan was still forming. We didn't have a name for it yet. It wasn't a nonprofit. It wasn't a business. It was just a home. For anyone who needed one. And something about that felt more solid than anything I'd ever built. By midsummer, the house had a rhythm. Tuesdays were tea days. Thursdays were fix-it afternoons, where neighbors dropped by with busted radios, squeaky canes, or crooked picture frames. Sundays were the best, open porch day. We put out folding chairs, Jake played old vinyls on Dalton's record player, and people just showed up. Some brought stories. Some brought cookies. Some brought pain they didn't know how to name. And they left lighter. We never advertised. It spread through whispers, nods, and hands on shoulders. We weren't a charity. We weren't a program. We were just there. I'd never seen my kids more alive. Masha had a sketchbook of every guest she'd drawn, Ms. Liddell, the retired librarian, in her giant sun hat. Mr. Hobbs, who always wore 3 neckties, in case he needed to look official. Jake had become the handyman of the neighborhood at 12. He had regulars. One guy even gave him a tip, which he used to buy a better toolbox. For the foundation, he said. We didn't call it a foundation. But it was becoming something more than just us. Then, one afternoon, the doorbell rang, and it was her. Carol. Hair perfect. Jacket flawless. Designer sunglasses perched on her head like she'd walked out of a lifestyle ad. For a second, I thought I'd imagined it. Hey, she said, eyes scanning the porch, the freshly painted walls, the people chatting in the backyard. Can we talk? I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. She shifted her weight like she hadn't decided yet if she was going to be apologetic or offended. I heard about Ray. And the house. And the money. There it was. Not even a pause to ask how the kids were doing. I didn't come here for that, she added quickly, like the words had been preloaded in her mouth. I've been thinking. About the kids. About you. About everything I walked away from. I didn't say anything. She looked past me through the window. They seem happy, she murmured. They are, I said. She looked down. Then softer. I miss them. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even manipulative. But it was too late. You can't disappear from a child's life and expect to walk back in like it was a sabbatical. They don't talk about you much, I said. Jake stopped waiting for your calls months ago. Masha cried the first few weeks. But she stopped asking when you'd show up. Carol blinked. Her jaw tightened. I didn't know what to say. You could have started with something. She stood there for a while, silent. Then, I'd like to see them. Not like this, I said gently. Not today. She nodded, slowly. Before she left, she turned and looked at the house again. You really built something here. No, I said. We became something. She didn't reply. Just walked back to her car and drove away. And I didn't feel the need to chase her. She came back again. About 3 weeks after our last conversation, Carol messaged me out of the blue. This time, her tone was different, softer. She asked if we could talk. Not about money, not about logistics, about us. I agreed to meet, if only to give her the dignity of being heard. We met at a small cafe near the edge of the neighborhood. She looked the same, but something in her expression had changed, less polished, less sure of herself. As soon as we sat down, she smiled and said, You've really built something incredible, Tom. I always knew you would. You've always been a good man. I thanked her, but I kept my hands in my lap. She talked about the house in vague terms, about how proud she was, how she never stopped believing in me, how maybe everything we went through had a purpose. Then she said it. I'd like to try again. Maybe come back. Be a family. And just like that, I knew I had nothing left to give her. Because I wasn't the same man she left. And the life she walked out on had grown into something far richer, without her. I appreciate that, I said carefully. But we've moved on, Carol. And it's not just me anymore. It's Jake and Masha too. Her face faltered. They're still my kids, Tom. I nodded. They are. And I've never said a bad word about you to them. Never tried to turn them against you. But you need to understand, they've made their own decision. She looked down. They don't want to see me? I didn't answer directly. I didn't need to. The truth is, they had quietly let her go months ago. Jake didn't mention her name once after the divorce was finalized. Masha had stopped drawing the mom figure in her family portraits. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't spiteful. It was simply absence. Her absence, echoing loud and long enough for their hearts to adjust. And I never spoke badly of her. I never told them how she left or why. I gave them room to remember her kindly. But they didn't. Not because I poisoned them, but because she never reached back. Carol wiped at her eye, muttered something about being sorry, and stood to leave. I didn't stop her. I wished her well. Truly. But I didn't watch her go. Some doors don't need to be slammed shut. They just quietly stop being doors at all. Tonight, after the last guest left and the lights were low, I sat on the porch with a blanket across my knees and a coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Masha had fallen asleep with her sketchbook on her chest. Jake was still up, tinkering with an old floor lamp someone had donated. The wind was soft, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to do anything. Just be. There's something strange about rebuilding your life after someone walks away. At first, you think you have to fill every empty corner, prove that you're okay, that you're stronger, that you don't miss them. But eventually you stop proving. Eventually you just live. When Carol left, I thought the worst part would be explaining to the kids why she was gone. But I didn't need to. They saw it. They felt it. and they moved forward on their own terms. No hate. Just distance. And in that distance, we found something better than a perfect family photo: truth. We found that showing up matters more than saying the right thing. That kindness, especially when it's quiet and inconvenient, changes people. That love doesn't have to be loud, it just has to be consistent. And we learn that sometimes, the best inheritance isn't money or property. It's purpose. That's what Ray gave us. He left us his house, yes. And a portfolio that still doesn't feel real. But more than that, he left us direction. A way forward that wasn't about success or comfort or appearances. It was about choosing people. So if you're reading this, maybe wondering if your good intentions are taking you further from the life you thought you were supposed to have, let me say this. Keep going. The people who love things will never understand the people who love people. And that's okay. One day, you'll find yourself surrounded by everything you never knew you needed. And it'll be enough. More than enough.